Welcome to our free webinar that is conducted on the AVID Media Composer 2022.7. So here are a couple of things that I just need to give you up front. This webinar is intended for users who are either novices or they have been using AVID Media Composer for a while, but they want to learn some shortcuts, some tricks, some gimmicks, some cool things, and I will address them. So let's start with right away with a preset sequence that we put together. So anyways, you see a variety of things, namely video track 1, 2, and 3. You understand how the turning on the tracks is going in AVID. It looks like a little monitor that is activating video track 1. You see the video throughout that whole video track 1. If you add the second track, there's a filter that is applied to the entire video 1, and that is a blur filter. And you can see that the icon is identifying it as an effect. If you don't know what effect is, you know by now that if you park on the effect icon, activate the effect tool, and you identify which track you're working with, the effect editor identifies it as a blur effect, and it tells you that it is set up as a blur default, so it affects the entire video track 1. The second track is a new feature that has been introduced about 2.5 years ago. It is changing the title tool from whatever it was before to a effect. So essentially the title is an effect, and I will just quickly demonstrate where you would find it. You would find it in the effects palette, and in the effects palette there is a title. So you would actually grab a effect onto a track, and that's what the title is now in AVID Media Composer. On this particular sequence, you can park on the title and you can reactivate the effect parameters by activating the either title tool or just going to the effect editor, which is also an option. And you notice that there is a variety of things that you can work with. For example, if you want to change the text, activate the title tool, which obviously is silly, but you understand the principle. You can also grab that object. An object is this wireframe, and you can move it around. So it is very practical, and as I said, it is a effect from now on. Now, in order for me to save things and to move things around, I need to know where the project is. So the first thing that AVID editors ask is, where does the project physically live? So there's a couple of ways of finding it out. Generally, what we do is when we try to find out where the project is, we do not leave the application, but we leave the actual project. In order for you to leave the project, you, in the file drop-down, activate your close project, and that close project gets you back to the opening window, which is what you see when you open up Media Composer. This is the window where you started new projects. This is the window where you use the original ones. This is the window where you find the shared AVID projects, and also where you activate import if you want to, or just start a new user profile. The new projects you're familiar with is giving you in the tab the options of picking from anything from the PAL and TSC family, going up higher in the 1280/720, 1920, 1080. Then you have the 2K, then you have the Ultra HD, which is 3840 by 2160. Then you have the 4 flavors of the 4K, 8K, and 16K, and obviously the customizers. So this is something that you can learn in other YouTube webinars or YouTube demonstrations, but what I'm looking for is finding out where the existing project is, and if I want to switch from that existing project someplace else, I'll physically just either click on the icon that represents that project and double click open it up, or on the bottom right hand corner open it up. Unlike other applications, AVID can only run one project at one time. It is a safety, it is a security which AVID designed. So if you are working on a 720p, which is 1280-720, you are guaranteed that whatever you bring into that project will be matching that 1280-720 at a 24 drop frame, which is listed here as 23.976. So if you want to bring in material from other projects, you would have to open up bins. And this is where the whole question of what is a bin, what is a folder, is going to be explained more in detail. Let me just get back into the project that I started off as a demonstration. So left double clicking should put me back. And here is the first question I'm asking. And this is a very valid question for anybody who wants to save, backup, move, copy material. By definition, AVID Media Composer is using a bin concept to store the material that it deals with, namely the clips or the sequences or preset template effects and music. I also have some quick transitions that I built earlier. So essentially, the bin is the smallest entity. Now you can see that the bin also lives inside a folder, and the folder can contain subfolders if you want to. Quick shortcut, right click, drop down, create a new folder. I'm going to call it all the other stuff. And you notice that folder is able to get into inside a folder, so I can have a subfolder. Essentially, the folder is a larger storage environment compared to the bin. Now, the benefit of having a bin and using a bin is the following. If you have a environment, like in this case, I have all my sequences in a bin, and let's call it the MC July webinar sequence. Inside that bin are 4 separate stories that I put together, and these are all for the demonstration. If you want to keep the bin inside the project, you can keep it. If you want to copy it, move it, delete it, share it with people, here are a couple of ways of doing that. So if I want to find out where a bin lives, I can right click on it. The drop down gives me an option of reveal file, and the reveal file identifies that my computer primary contains that particular bin. Users, shared, AVID Media Composer, shared projects, webinar, and that is the webinar sequences. That is a small 3.6 megabyte file that I can copy, paste, move around, and we'll talk about how that would be beneficial to you. Before we get to the point, let's just run through a couple of things that are essential to understand how Media Composer can be started. When I say started, this is what I mean by that. Command S is going to save everything I have up to this point, and now Command Q, Control Q on the Windows, leaves the application and leaves the project. Those are 2 different concepts. So let's open up the software by left double clicking on the AVID Media Composer dock. On the Macintosh we have the dock. When the dock icon is activated, the Media Composer goes through a process of startup, and it identifies itself as in this case 2022.7. It loads all the plugins. Essentially, it is sending out a message to all the components that are plugged into that computer system, letting them know that it will be used or they will be used. So when Media Composer opens up, this is the opening window. We saw this earlier. This presumes that application is ready, and now you can pick which project to open up. So if I want to open up a different project, double click on it, opens it, and it switches from whatever we had earlier onto a different one. If the media is connected, and if the project is connected to the media, the result should be the following. I do have information that some stories are put together, or I can look at some footage that is part of that project. Now, remember, just earlier we went into identifying the way to leave the project, switch projects, close the project, and let's go back again into the 110 parkour. So the switching of the project is very easy. Now, if you quit Command Q, you know that you're quitting the application that quits the project. So what I'm showing you now is a backdoor opening the project. If we know where the project lives, let's say that we do. And in this case, we know that it is in the users, in the shared, in the Media Composer, inside the shared project. And inside the shared project, there is the name that we just saw earlier, and that was labeled MC110 parkour instructor. Now, this is actually project, the folder. That's the metadata. That is the project. How much space did it use up? Let's find out. It's about 14.4 megabytes. Not a lot. You can save this whole thing by saying, hey, Option, drag it down. So now the metadata for the project is moved on a desktop in this case. You can move it to a drive, external, take it with you. Point is that if you are working for someone, it is not a bad idea to always back it up just in case you go on vacation, go on the weekend, somebody messes up your stuff, so you can have a backup of it. So let me kill that. So that's one way of backing up a project. Again, it is only just metadata. It is not media connected to it. You understand by now that if you are a novice, here's how we can explain what the Media Composer media is. That is the actual media. That is the actual metadata connecting to. So in this case, the MXF files are being connected to the project information. So the project information is a place where you have a number of files, and some of them are recognizable because we just addressed it minutes ago. The AVB, which is actually a identification of a bin, standing for AVID Virtual Bin. But there's also a AVP, which is actually the project. So if you click on the AVB, it identifies it's a bin, but if you click on the AVP, it is the project. Therefore, if you want to open up the project not by application and then the project, you can left double click on it. If you know where the project lives, in this case we know where it is. Inside that folder we found the AVP, and now Media Composer opens. The only thing that should happen is the opening window of Media Composer doesn't show up anymore. It bypasses that, so you are saving one step. If everything works as it should, that is a time saver. Now, let's do quick editing, because this is something that you as an editor did earlier in your career if you worked on different platform when you came over to AVID, or if you're a total novice to AVID. You need to learn how editing functions. So what I'm going to do is look for a preset story, precut story that is in my sequences, and I'm going to call it O2, put it into the timeline, and I will duplicate it by simply saying to the computer, well, I don't have voice recognition yet. That would be cool, right? The fastest way to duplicate a sequence is click on it, and Command D, Control D duplicates it. And I will call it for you only. So now I have a duplicate sequence that I named for you only. Double clicking puts it into the timeline, and let me clear out the source in the meantime. I will take off the pictures, I will take off the video by taking off that entire track. Go to the beginning, type in I, mark in, O out, and lift out all the information that is in there. So now I have a musical bed. Now, some editors like to have the waveforms visible, and in order for you to see the waveform, the setting should be activated by track control panels. Open up the track control panel. Here it is, the waveforms. The waveforms are really practical because you know where you are, the beats, so you can actually park on a beat. So here, what is being seen? It uses up lots of RAM, and some people like it, some people don't. I will show a different way of turning on the tracks. Notice that I'm clicking on each track individually. I am opening up real estate on the left side of the timeline, and if I don't want to do that, on the bottom of the timeline there is a go to fast menu, and in the fast menu I can define that the audio data is not going to be allowed per track setting turned on, but it will be global. The benefit of this is that if I turn that audio data to be waveform global, I can save that, and if I have it saved, I'm going to call it waves only. And I'll call it 1, 2, 3 because I may have a different setting. So if I have a default setting, which in this case would be probably down there, default, there we go. And if I want to switch from the default setting to what I just saved earlier, I believe it was called waves only. Watch what happens. It remembers not just the color of the track, it remembers what I did and shows me everything that I chose to see and have in the timeline view. Now comes the quick story editing. I will use a drag and drop technique that is very popular still. I don't really have any preference of drag and drop or using keyboard shortcut, but just for simplicity, let me show you what is the drag and drop is going to do for you. So if I select a number of clips, in this case, here is the group, and I will presume that I can drag them into the timeline. In the timeline, I need to make sure that nothing is selected, and I drag it in and I drop it in. If I drop it in, I should see all those clips in there. Command / shows me that I brought in a number of clips, and in order for me to really see the color of it, I like to color them. So I'm going to color, let's say, red, change a second one to, let's say, yellow, and then green, and then I'm going to have some blue. I'm not going to go through the whole thing. I'm not going to waste your time on this, but here are a couple of the colors, at least the first set of colors. In order for you to see those colors, bottom left-hand corner, because the bottom left-hand corner fast menu is visual, it is giving you visual choices. I will select the clip color to be of the source. Therefore, you see those 4, 5, 6 of them. The cool thing here is that you can identify how much of a clip you used, and that goes back to if you are leasing, renting, borrowing, buying, duration of clips as archive or music, or just to find out what character, if a character is yellow, how many times that character is played in a story. Anyways, with this, I'm going to also introduce you to 2 tools that I love, and those are top and tail. They are also available in other applications. We actually in AVID call them top and tail, and I assign them on the top of the toolbar. It means that if I play something from the beginning, in this case I'm playing it from the beginning, and at one point I stop. Let me try that. So at the beat, I will cut off the portion of that red clip all the way to the end by using the tail. No mark in, no mark out, it's done. I will do the same thing with the yellow clip. Continue playing. On that beat, I'm going to cut off everything from that playhead till the end of the shot. That's why it's called the tail. Done. The rest of the guys are short, so I'm not going to mess with them, but I'm going to continue playing from the 2, 3, 4, 5th shot. And I'm going to cut them off as I go. And you notice that I'm cutting on time. Now here I lost the color, and the question is, what is that clip? So in my scenario, in order for me to find a clip where it came from is generally the fastest this way. Park on the clip, the playhead, right click on video 1, and the drop down match frame puts it into source monitor. And in the source monitor, I ask the computer to show me where that bin is. Therefore, it highlights it so that red is going to change to, let's say, iconized. There we go. So now we have a very clear understanding what was used, how we used it. I'm going to add additional colors as I go along, and in Media Composer, when we use the Macintosh, we have all these nice color things to work with. I generally like to pick them from the crayons because they are consistent for internet and anything else. So I'm going to do one more, and I hope that I will fill up your vocabulary here. Let me play it. And I hope that I'm going to fill up this story very interestingly. And from this point, I'm going to cut out the green. Now in this case, I have a clip that I need more of. Presumption is that I know that there is more of. And if I don't, remember we did it earlier, we parked on the clip, we right click on the V1, match frame it, and notice that, we only used a section of it. So we can actually extend before or after. So in this case, I'm going to go before, go into trim mode, left to right. Lasso identifies the trim. Going to the left side, and I'm going to go play backwards real time as opposed to go frame by frame or in multiple frames. If I play backwards, it is my J button. Watch what happens to the video. It is a live trimming, which nobody has. Other applications have JKL trimming. This is actually JKL trimming, but they don't have it live. They have to refresh and then it stops. So in this case, I'm going to cut off the last section and tail, and I have now something to work with. The scenario that I am now finishing off is, let's say these colors will be different and that color, and I have one last one. Let's say that's one, I don't know. So the question comes up now, if you would like to add a effect, and this is where AVID does very well with this. If you park in the transition between a cut, it is now giving you a choice where you can add a horizontal. We call it transitional effect. The default transitional effect is a dissolve, and there's a whole bunch of them that we have set up. I'm going to do a dip to color just for fun. By definition, a dip to color is dipping to black. And if I type in a number 1, 2, it's going to be 12 frames long. Let's check it out. And you can see that it dips to that color. Now, if someone says they want to dip it to different color, like red, green, blue, white, it doesn't matter. Even white is a color, and we'll talk about that just in a moment. So you park on the transition, go into the effect editor, which is this icon. And in the effect icon activation, the dip to color shows up and identifies itself as a dip to color. You change the color by double clicking on the background color. Let's say change it to nice soft cyan. And we talked about the color. If you have the same amount of red, which is 255, same amount of green, same amount of blue, it is white. Therefore, that's why I said earlier that white is a color in digital. In this case, I don't need to do that. I'm going to have the green and blue, which creates cyan. By definition, it's a pure cyan. So I have a nice pure cyan dissolve. I'm going to explain how you can save that. So I have a bin already created called Quick Transitions. If that Quick Transition bin is opened and I go into the effect editing, I can grab that particular icon that represents a dip to color, and because it's a dip to color to a cyan, CY is the abbreviation for it, now I have it available for future use. And this is where I told you earlier, if you want to have that bin available and you want to separate it from the project, what's it called? Quick Transitions. Remember that. Keep that in mind. I'm going to have my desktop minimized, and I'm going to open up the tool that is looking for the quick transitions. So right click on it, reveal the file. As in the past, we found it user, shared, media composer, shared projects, and it is living in the webinar July, and it's called Quick Transitions. This Quick Transitions bin can be taken out by holding Option Alt on the Windows, and I can send it to myself as an email attachment, and it is using up about how much? Using up about, in this case, 78 kilobytes on disk. That's metadata. That's absolutely really, really cool to work with. How so? You can put on your USB card, SD card, anything that is storable, or I've seen people store it in the cloud, so if they travel, you can always access them. Now, these are all presets, and you notice that it has a specific name. The specificity of the name is important. Specificity. It means that it has to be exactly that name, Quick Transitions, if you want to use the tool that I'm now working on. I'm going to mark in and out. I put a blanket on this timeline, and all the transitions that I have put a blanket on will now get this particular effect, namely the dip to color cyan. How? The drop down in the Quick Transitions shows me default transitions, but it also shows me a whole bunch of effects that are below the line. Those effects are the ones that show up if you have put them in the Quick Transitions. If I change the name of Quick Transitions to something else, let's just call it 111. Watch how the name is different. Command that saves it so the computer refreshes it. Next time I want to do the blanket, mark in, mark out, and I want to apply an effect to all of those transitions under that blanket. Where did those presets go? Oh, I renamed the bin to something else, Quick Transitions. They still show up in the effects palette. They would show up as Quick Transitions, okay? But they will not be usable for the blanket. So for the blanket to use it, I need to make sure that I call them back, and I name it as I just did, 1, 2, 3 off. Quick Transitions. It's plural, get the spelling right. And if you reactivate the Quick Transition, you now see those guys available. And I wanted to have the cyan to all of them. Therefore, I will add that transition specific color, specific name, to all transitions that are under the blanket into out. And I don't need to render them in AVID. If the system is fast enough and you have enough RAM, you should be able to play them real time. Let's play out a couple of these guys, and I'm going to make it full screen. Command Shift F, full screen. Okay, so we're impressed by it. Now, you learned by now a couple of the tricks that AVID does have. Well, it's not a trick actually, but it is a way of identifying and finding an element like a bin. And the bin location, when you reveal it, is very, very helpful for you to duplicate it, copy it, move it. So I recommend this tool to be used extensively if you find it useful. If you don't find it useful, obviously it's up to you. Another tool that I hope you will use over and over again is this naming of a bin, quick and space in between transitions, and put all your templates in there. So if you want to move things around and you want to put them on a blanket, so for example, half the show is going to be blanketed, whatever the color was, in this case cyan, and the rest of the stuff is going to be black and white. And I do have some white already preset. Let's see if that works. Drop down the quick transition, and in the quick transition drop down, look for that 12 frame white. All of them, meaning all of those edits, will be affected. And if I apply them, there we go. So I have some cyan, 1, 2, and then I have the white. So you understand the principle. This is probably one of the tools that as an editor you will like a lot, use a lot, and if you are a novice to AVID, start thinking about using these tools as well as the one that I showed you just minutes ago, which in the trim lets me get out of the blanket, turn the blanket off, G, park on a transition between two shots, hit U, you are in trim mode. By definition, know that if you are in a dual roller trim, in this case the dual roller means that I have the last trim of the outgoing, first trim of the incoming, I should be able to move around, and if I move around I should be able to trim on one side. Now if the trim does not give me that option, I will probably see it better if I go into the transition and say, hey, there we go, oh, I should have enough, so I should be able to trim on each side. Now when you trim, the trimming tool allows you to trim in single frames to the left, single frames to the right, you got that. A keyboard shortcut for that exists in the command comma, bring in the keyboard, and the keyboard shortcut according to my default setup shows me that, yeah, those buttons M, comma, period, / are a trim button selection. But the most important, and the one I like a lot, is the dynamic trimming. And the dynamic trimming presumes that I'm going to use the J button to move to the left and the L button to the right. And if I hold down K and J, I go slow speed, half speed, scrub it. And if I do K and L, I scrub to the right. And if I hold down K and tap J, 1 frame at a time, and I hold down K and L, tap 1 frame at a time, L. Now the benefit here is, for me and for every editor who I have worked with, is that you can hear the trim. You can actually hear what you are trimming. If you are not using the JKL, you may not hear what you are trimming. You can see that you are trimming audio, but you don't hear what you trimmed. You have to turn on a scrubber, which is a nice tool, but it's a digital scrubber. So to me, that's not a big one. I don't really benefit from it. It's not consistent. I can actually drag it manually and I can say, I can hear the, but to me that's not as practical as the JKL trimmer, J, L. Essentially, if you have a dialogue, you would be able to use that and you can hear what you trimmed off as well as you see it. So get out of trim mode, which is U, And let's just go and talk about segment effects. So now we understood some of the transitional effects. These are not all of them, obviously. There's a family of them in the effects palette. They are labeled wipe, conceal, edge wipe, matrix wipe, peel, push, things of that sort. So if you want to apply something like that, it would be easy. And I can drag an effect that is going to be different. To move along, let's go and talk about the segment effects. I don't remember where I left the sequence, so if you don't remember, this is always a good tool to go to. Show me where the sequence lives. Find bin. So it finds the bin, it identifies it, and it highlights it. Oh, that's the one that I named for you only. Let's talk about the segment effects. The segment effects in AVID are very practical, and they have a very easy way of being manipulated. So for example, I would like to have the third shot set up in such a way where the guy doesn't jump in from the right side, he jumps in from the left side. In the family of effects, the effect family that does this for me is the image family, and I have a simple flop applied to that shot. And I can see that 180 degrees is a different angle. I can also go silly and select a whole bunch of clips. Let's do that by selecting clip 1, 2, 3. These are all normal clips. And just for silliness, double-clicking on the flop, you can see that all 3 of them are now flopped. The tool that here I'm applying is applying one effect per segment. You could argue that it is too complicated to have them individually. You can say select 1, 2, 3 shots. You can see they're highlighted. And holding down Option, double-click on the flip. Now you put a blanket on all 3 of them. The question is, what happened to the clips? I don't see the cuts. Well, this is where the concept of the next level of the effects is called the nested effects. Double-clicking on it, there we go. That's where the clips are. So you have 1, 2, and 3, and we put a blanket on those 3. That essentially means that if I have another video track, Command Y, and I, let's say, clear out the effect that I have on the segment. Oh, how do we clear an effect? Here is our new friend called Ghostbusters. No, it's not called Ghostbusters. We call it Remove Effect. Anyways, so if we apply the same thing, flip on a video track 2, imagine that it's a filter above. Now the entire show is upside down. That is a cool way to manipulate things, and in this case I will get a color effect applied to the second layer. The color effect is going to make everything black and white by going into the effect mode and drag the saturation down to, let's say, 0. So now we're black and white. The benefit of having this second layer, the effect filter, is that I can turn it off and I can turn it on. But notice that I used up 2 tracks video. Again, the practicality is without the effect, with the effect. So I can show it to the person who is behind me and giving me instructions, unless I'm the person doing that. Now, if that is something that you like, fine. If you don't, let me show you quickly how to delete a video track. Can we put on the entire show a blanket where not just 1, not 3, but the entire show, let's select all of the clips that are part of the show, are gonna be color. Remember, if you double click, each of the elements gets it separately. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for adding a blanket effect, and holding down Option, Alt on the Windows puts it now, the blanket is on top. The only benefit here is that now I save the track, but some people say, well, how do you turn that effect off? Well, let's add the effects first. Let's go silly and go creative and push the saturation, brighten up the entire show, add some more contrast, and saturate it very, very, very brightly. And maybe even can add some red color to it, warm up the day. It's a very hot day throughout the whole show. So the entire show is like very saturated. If you take the effect off, you lose that. No, I don't want to take it off. I want to turn it off. So the way to turn it off, you have a way on the bottom of the timeline, a step in where it peels off the effect and puts it back on. And you say, well, while I put the effect on, the phone call came in and I need to do some dissolves Oh, double click, step inside. Now you can define that the blank is going to be, let's say, only, let's say, how many shots? 1, edit point, 2, 3, 4. And because you're applying that effect to that inside, to the nest, and you bring up your friend, remember the friend we had? The dip to color. Now, if you apply the dip to white, watch what happens. The dip to white is going to dip, but it's going to be a white that is affected by the color that is above it. I'm going to select just 4 shots, just for fun purposes, and make those 4 shots flop. Holding down Option, double click, so the 4 shots that are here are opposite inside the nest. Got it. So now, if you park on the section where 2 effects are being identified, video 1 is video 1, and the V1.1 is the inside. Got it. So that's not above, it's behind. If I go into the effects mode, watch what happens. It says, yeah, I have the color effect, and I don't see the one behind it. Why not? Because it's not opened. There we go. So now if I open it and activate it, let's find out. There we go. The flop is in there. Aha, so there are 2 effects in it. Because we like to simplify things, we editors use this technique a lot. And here is a perfect example where I would use that. Please say hello to the new sequence that I have preset for you. And on that sequence, I do have a layer where I have video 1, video 2 and 1, 3, and 4, 3, 2, 1. So I have 4 layers. One is the background, then I have the red, then I have the green, the blue. The way I'm calling them out is exactly the hierarchy. The top is the blue, below that is the green, below is the red, and below the red is the original normal default color. So the instructions I have are very specific. Let's make the color of each of them separate. So I will turn off and get the colors of these 3 layers, video 2, 3, and 4, as well as take the effects off from all of them. See, all 3 are selected, and globally I'll take off 1, the cream, and then I'm going to take off the blueberries. So let's build them. The second layer is covering the first one, and in order for me to make it work, meaning to have a picture-in-picture, I go into the picture-in-picture family, which is a blend effect, and I drag the picture-in-picture onto layer 2. So it's a picture-in-picture. That's easy. On the next one, I'll do the same thing, but this is too time-consuming. So my suggestion would be, if you want to apply the same effect to all 3 of them, highlight them all 3, and double-click on the picture-in-picture. So now you have 3 picture-in-pictures on top of each other. You don't see it because layer 1, soloing it, layer 2, layer 3, layer 4. Aha, they are on top of each other, that's why. So I'm going to move them individually very, very simply by parking on one of them. Go into effects mode, and in effects mode, I just move one of those guys upper right-hand corner because it's solo. There we go. Now it shows things. Because I want to make sure that it is wireframed, I add a border to it, and I'm going to call this border a red border. Double-click, make it red. So this is a red border. If you don't see it, it's because the width of the border is not. That's going to be the red one. So that one is done. The second one is in the middle. That's fine. Affecting it. Opening up the effect mode, and that's what's going to be the green one. So if I add the width of that, double click, here's the green, and it's going to be the red green. I don't see it because the width is not assigned. There we go, that's the green one. Go 1 layer below that. Open up the effect mode, and in this case, I'm going to move that to the left a little bit. Which one? The one that is below. There we go. So now that's going to be the red, green, and blue. The blue is going to be the below one. The below one. It's not the below one. That's on video track 2. And here is the width. So now the producer or the producers above my pay grade want to have the red wireframed turned red, the green green, and the blue blue. So I am understanding that, yes, if I go into the effects family, I just earlier in this session showed you that the image family has a whole bunch of things. So if I now want to apply a color to that particular red one, I hold down Option and drag the color effect and put it onto the top. Okay, so on the top I see it, but it didn't do anything color. How come? Well, I need to adjust the color. Go into effects mode, and I want to make it red. Generally, the red is easy to do if you bring the saturation down, make it black and white, and you push the red, generally. And I push the red, and for some reason, everything is red. Because the red effect is on top of everybody, affects everybody below. That is why you and I will now learn a very interesting technique that you step inside the nest and you apply to the footage that is inside the nest, not on the top. So one more time, the color will be taken off of the top layer. In this case, you make sure that it is just that layer. There we go. Take that color off. And now step inside that layer, just that one, not multiple ones, just the one layer, and drag the color effect inside. And if you inside drag that color effect and you follow what I just did earlier, bring the saturation down and just make the inside red. There we go. So now we have an understanding of what a nesting does. I will do the same thing for the green track. Step inside, drag the color, drag the color, activate it, make sure that the inside is going to be green. We agreed that if we take the saturation off, we have an ability to make it green. There we go. Take off the red, so we have it green. And the next one comes, and it's going to be the blue. Step inside, grab the color effect. Now we understand how the nested color is working. Push it up, push the blue, take the green, take the red, and now we have a environment where we have 3 effects plus the inside. And now on top of that, we add another video track because the end of the day, somebody calls out and say, hey, can we make it letterbox? Yes, that letterbox is going to be on the top layer. Drag it onto video track 5 in this case. Increase the size of that track, park on the effect icon, and make it letterbox by showing you that, yes, I can do a letterbox which is 80% of the height, which is generally the letterbox you would see in movies. And if I want to see full screen, this is what I have. There we go. So I have the letterbox above. Now, because I can color it, I can color the background of the letterbox, and this is where things go crazy. Let's say make it red, and I want to change the timing of it, adding some keyframes to be more specific, and in this case I'm going to change the color of that to, let's say, yellow. By the time it gets in the middle and by the time I reach the end, I'm going to add another keyframe and make it magenta, which I like, which is this magenta purple thing. There we go. So the color should change throughout time in the story. Command S it. My show is over, guys. Hopefully you got some understanding of how easily it is to manipulate layers. Video 1, 2, 1, 1, 3, 2, 1, 4, 3, 2, 1, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So if this is the proper mask, it is good, it is okay, it sticks. If it is not, and I'm gonna change it quickly to something very simple, which I've seen a lot, it doesn't make sense for the picture-in-picture, but it might make sense for the story. So on that lower layer, I will add a different mask. I'm gonna select that entire lower layer, video track 1, and apply an effect that you will recognize. Hold down Option, double click on the mask, and inside that mask I'll show you something that you probably have seen before, and that is the width is going to be brought down to, I believe, 35 is enough. There we go. So now we're